Good morning, everyone. Welcome at our webinar where we will present European Resource Adequacy Assessment 2025 results and beyond for you. My name is Lukas Galdikas. I'm working as the project manager of ERAA 2025 at ENTSO-E. And it will be my honor today to moderate this webinar for you. First thing, before I hand over some words to our speakers today, I would like to introduce you our agenda, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen. So we will start with the welcome and introduction, and I will be pleased to hand over this part to Patricia Labra, our chair of System Development Committee. Afterwards, we will proceed and we'll present you the context of ERAA itself. And in this instance, we'll hand over this presentation to Ralph Fechter, our convener of steering group ERAA. Further on, we will also proceed and try to refresh and recap some of the methodological improvements to you. And this will be presented by Daniel Veritas, our vice convener of steering group ERAA. And eventually we will reach the part with the results, which will be presented by Łukasz Jezynski, our member of the steering group. And we will summarize it with the takeaways and next steps by, again, convener of our steering group, Ralph Fechter. And afterwards, we will start the Q&A session, which I will be pleased to moderate myself. About the more practical matters of the webinar, be aware that the functions of the Microsoft Teams are disabled, and we are looking forward to receive your questions on Slido platform. At this very moment, you have a QR code and a numerical code to join Slido platform to raise your questions there. Feel free to do this now. Also, as we move through the presentation, there will be always these codes available for you on the screen. So in case you missed now this code, don't worry. It will be available throughout the presentation and also at the end of the presentation. Also be aware that this webinar is recorded and it will be published also on our website. So don't worry. Also, if you miss something, you will be able to recap it afterwards. Today or tomorrow, it should also appear on our website as usual. Said this, I feel that I have finished my part in this slide opening, and I'm very pleased now to hand over the welcome word and introduction word to our chair of System Development Committee, Patricia. So, Patricia, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for attending and for your interest on this topic of high European relevance, I would say. I would invite everyone to use the Q&A session today to clarify all your doubts or concerns. That's the objective of the webinar today. Let's also use this introduction to see an outlook about the studies that ENTSO-E performs with the different time frames. So if you can, Lucas, go to the next slide, perhaps we can give this global view. Yeah, those studies that ENTSO-E performs allow to support somehow the decision makers to guide the European power system to a secure, a sustainable, and an affordable one. For the long-term decisions, we have the 10-year Network Development Plan, the TYNDP, as we usually call it. It looks more than 10 years ahead, and these are primarily policy decisions, and here the uncertainty is high due to the extended time frame. It tries to look up to 2050. So there the uncertainty is it's higher. It tries to guide then those policy decisions, as I mentioned. We have also the midterm decisions that focus on a period of 1 to 10 years. And this is where the European Resource Adequacy Assessment, the ERA, that it's our focus today, plays a crucial role. The ERA supports both investments and policy decisions related to a safe balance between generation demand and storage, and helps to be prepared for the coming decade. And then we have also short-term decisions that cover operational aspects, ranging from real-time to week-ahead adequacy and seasonal outlooks. Here, the uncertainty related to installed capacity, generation availability, demand evolution is lower, but the need for timely and accurate information is critical. The last release of the seasonal outlooks was the winter outlook 2025-2026. It was published last November 2025. You can find it in the ENTSO-E website. And as we move from short-term to long-term planning, as you can imagine, and I've mentioned, the level of the uncertainty increases. So therefore, here is essential to coordinate all these studies and to have robust methodologies and also robust data to support the decision making at every stage. So today the focus is the ERA. We will see the result of the ERA 2025 and how they have been obtained. We will understand why continuous monitoring of the adequacy aspect is critical, and how urgent are needed some actions to ensure resource adequacy. I invite everyone to take advantage of this session to try to clarify all your concerns, and that could be all from my side. Please, Ralph, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for this introduction. My name is Ralph Pfeiffer, and I'm acted in ERA 2025 as a convener of the steering group of this project. I would like to present you some context of this ERA product before we later on then enter into the more detailed content-wise presentation. So if we may move on to the next slide, what is ERA all about? First of all, ERA is a legal mandate, and it shall be performed by ENTSO-E annually. This ERA 2025 is the 5th edition since 2021. It is prepared and published, and the typical procedure is that ENTSO-E performs the ERA analysis, publishes then a report and submits it to ACER for either approval or amendment. And since the 2023 editions, the ERAs have been amended and approved by ACER accordingly. The ERA assesses the adequacy of the European resource adequacy of the European power system for a time horizon of the next 10 years, but focuses on selected target years within these horizon. ERA is not a perfect foresight on how the system will develop. That is, but it is based, since nobody knows this perfect foresight, but it is based on scenario assumptions on how the developments can be, and these scenario assumptions are mainly based on the energy policy targets at national level, which of course shall align to the overall pan-European EU energy policy and climate targets. Based on that, the resource adequacy risks are assessed, and the main objective and target of ERAA is to inform decision makers and stakeholders about the situation, about emerging risks and adequacy concerns, that further actions then can be taken. In particular, the ERAA legitimates in case that adequacies of concerns are observed, are identified for certain member states or bidding zones, that capacity mechanisms can be implemented based on the findings of ERAA. It's not the, let's say, only way to introduce capacity mechanisms. There are others as well, but certainly as a sufficient conditions, identification of resource adequacy concerns gives legitimation here from ERAA. Well, the objective, of course, is to support by these studies and so the energy transition in Europe by transparent data complementing our other planning studies which are happening. So let's move on to the next slide here. As said already, this is a bit overview on the, let's say, scope of ERAA. It is a pan-European study, so within these adequacy analysis, the entire European power system is modeled, most of it in an explicit way, which means it is really subject to the adequacy analysis, and adequacy indicators are calculated for these countries and bidding zones, and some, let's say, adjacent countries which are interconnected to Europe are implicitly modeled, that we can still recognize their impact on the European adequacy situations, and for specific and regrettably special conditions and situation. In this analysis, Ukraine was exempted from the analysis because, as of the situation and uncertainty of developments. As you can also see here, indicated by the maps here in the middle and the right of this slide, the ERAA is based on market modeling, and the market rules and the market framework is represented in ERAA accordingly. And what this slide here shall underline or emphasize is that in particular the flow-based market coupling for the two big areas where it is implemented, the core region and the Nordic region, is considered in both, let's say, the investment and the adequacy analysis of ERAA. On the next slide, we will see the principle of ERAA, how it works, and this has to be read from the left to the right. As said, ERAA is based on scenarios which are delivered to ENTSO-E. It's a bottom-up assembly of scenario based on the relevant data ENTSO-E collects and obtains from the TSOs across Europe. These data are, let's say, we call it national plans, the scenario, which means that they are based on the relevant national energy and climate plans, may be adjusted as the case may be according to latest developments and updates to the original NECP plans. Those data consist of the relevant market data, generation capacities, transfer capacities, flow-based market coupling. I mentioned already the relevant parameters need to be delivered, but also input on renewable generation, may it be wind, solar, or hydro, and the relevant weather data to be considered in the analysis, and of course, particularly the demand time series expected, which are expected for the next decade, and in particular for the target years under under simulation here within the ERA. These data submissions are then assembled in a central database, which then feed into the two main modules of the ERA. First, there is an economic viability assessment. This is an investment model which shall or analyzes, simulates for the target years of the next decade here within ERA, the viability of the mainly generation, storage, and flexibility portfolio in each study zone. This investment model then based on economic viability or not, invests or decommissions units and capacities. So we see how the portfolio of generation, storage, and flexibility varies across these target years of the ERA. With the outcome then of the investment models are the input data of the true adequacy analysis, which is then a probabilistic analysis for the target years under consideration, where a large amount of economic dispatch calculations is carried out for different combinations of climate years and outage or maintenance scenarios of the generation fleet. It's so-called Monte Carlo simulation, which results then from which the adequacy metrics and the adequacy indicators then can be obtained, which indicate whether an adequacy concern exists or not when comparing the outputs of the simulation, particularly the loss of load expectation against the reliability standards in those countries who have defined them already. And if you're above or below the reliability standard, actually then is an indication whether you have an adequacy concern, risk for security of supply, or maybe not. As said also, it's about risk. It's not about, let's say, certainty that something can happen, but let's say the higher the indicator is, and even if it is above the reliability standard, one should feel concerned that there's a higher risk that, let's say, an adequacy issue, situation where demand cannot be matched by generation and imports and so power can happen, but it does not say that it will definitely happen. So if we move on, last highlight I want to give here in this slide is what was the main focus for new improvement and new feature of the ERA 2025. In 2024 and previous ERA, this investment model, the EVA, was subject to some criticism that the outcomes may be overly optimistic in terms of investments in new capacities, maybe generation, storage, or flexibilities. And the reason behind that is that the let's say investment decisions were quite largely based on revenues which were obtained in the simulation model from few scarcity hours with very high prices. Well, and when you check or validate this against reality and enter into discussions also with investors, there are some reservations, because that of course would be highly risky investments if you rely on such revenues from a few hours, which with also a huge uncertainty that they may occur. Therefore, this ERA 2025 has developed further the investment modeling. We have introduced two different approaches on how to consider better than in previous versions the investor risk aversion behavior, and that of course has an impact on the relevant results. I won't tell more on this right now, because when we enter now the methodological section of this presentation, we will dive in deeper on that specific issue. With that, I would like also to hand over for the next part of the presentation to my colleague Daniel.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me well, by the way? Checking the sound. Yeah,
yep.
Okay. So hello, good morning. Yes, Daniel Huertas. I have served as vice convener of a steering group of ERA 25, and I would like indeed to give you an overview of the methodological improvements. In view of time, we will not be able to cover all details, so we also, of course, invite you to submit your questions and, of course, to read the ERA, the different documents for ERA 25 for further in-depth understanding of all details. Next slide, please. So as Ralph has mentioned, this is our fifth ERA, and this is a very complex methodology which involves very complex modeling and implementation choices. Nevertheless, we are aiming to have a robust product which also continuously improves and evolves. Learning by doing very much, and building on the knowledge that we consolidate at each of the ERA editions. In that spirit, we have focused on the following improvements for this year. One of them is the improvement on the weather selection scenario. We need to select specific weather scenarios for the economic viability. I will come to that in a second. Also, as already introduced by Ralph, we have enhanced the risk aversion treatment following a survey by investors and feedback we have received on the method. Third point, which is very important, we have also extended and continue showing scarcity events analysis, which provides insights on the hourly results for relevant indicators. And last, I would like to remind you that the two methods of economic viability assessment, which are in the ERA methodology approved by ACER, which we have also implemented in this ERA report as well. Next slide. So the weather scenario selection we do for the economic dispatch simulations, for which we quantified adequacy indicators, ENS and loss of load expectation. We use 36 climate scenarios, weather scenarios, we call them WS. Nevertheless, for performing an economic viability assessment due to the computational burden, we need to reduce this number of scenarios. And for this scenario, weather scenario selection methodology is necessary. In ERA 24, we did that only using pre-EBA economic dispatch results, only for one target year and one for such sample, which we received feedback this was not sufficient. Also acknowledging the fact that the scenario significantly changes before and after economic viability, therefore the revenues distribution changes. So this year, we took the results from ERA 24 after the final results, and we have performed the weather selection scenario on a post-EBA economic dispatch where economic decisions had already happened. We have done it for all years so that we account for the evolution of revenues across all target years considered, and also for all four audit samples, so that the selection is robust against random outages of units or interconnectors. What you see on the right is how we do that. So first, the first figure with the blue dots, it shows the full revenues of the full distribution of 36 weather scenarios. You see, you're expected to see 36 dots. You see that the distribution is highly highly non-uniform. You see that there are very high revenues indicating tail situations correlated with high price spikes. And the exercise is, we have already presented this in previous editions. We compare the full distribution of 36 weather scenarios with a selected number of scenarios, in this case 3, by minimizing this statistically called the Wasserstein distance. This allows us to find a selected subset, which in this case was the weather scenario 23, 27, 35. Of course, you always will have to check that your selection is faithful. This is what we have done by this theoretical subset 1, 2, and 3, where we, after doing the economic viability and performing the economic dispatch simulations, we ask ourselves, is our selection robust? And we indeed find that there are 3 subsets which could be different candidates of selection should we want to repeat the whole process again. This analysis basically shows that the original selection was robust and there was no need to do a second iteration. Very important is this selection is robust by looking at the median of the distribution, which is the dotted line that you see in the figure. This indicates that the selection we are considering, it is taking properly the distribution of revenues, but also it is robust against choices of weather scenarios in which you will have, let's say, outlier tail risk, which might change your solution. So that was very important for us to prove the robustness of our selection. Next one, please. Second point, very important. So you need to make an investment decision, acknowledging the fact that revenues, they have a highly non-uniform distribution. How we have done this? We have considered first the utility theory, economic theory, in which we consider an utility function called constant absolute risk function, CARA, and this function basically it gives you the relation between the revenues you expect to have and the value you give them to make an investment. According to should you have no risk, this relationship will be linear, which is basically risk neutral projection, this linear line you see in the figure. However, the acknowledgement that it was mentioned by Ralph, that the revenues are non-uniform and some big revenues might come by large price spikes happening with low probability. Acknowledgement of this fact makes that we consider a utility function which is concave. You see that it basically doesn't follow a linear trend, but rather an exponential trend, translating the fact that you do not account for all the revenues that you observe, and you would like to have some certainty and to be, let's say, risk adverse against those. That's why the utility function has this shape. At the end of the day, this is controlled by a parameter which later translates into hurdle premiums for different technologies. So we have revised the definition of the hurdle rates by performing this analysis, and we have updated the hurdles for important technologies like OCGT and CCGT. Investment candidates in our economic viability assessment. This first point takes into account the fact that you need to account for, safeguard your decisions against the risk of volatility of revenues. Still, you observe in the simulations, also mentioned by Ralph, and feedback we have received, that some investments might rely completely on these price spikes. So the investors in the survey we have performed have clearly communicated to us that these investments are considered to be non-robust, subject to high risk. So the second approach we have considered is we have looked at the actual distribution, calculated the cumulative function, and ask ourselves what is the part of the revenues that they are really somehow at risk and that you should not consider so if you're a rational investor. So we have done that first for the first target year, in which analysis of historical prices has given us a value around 1,000 euros. Revenue cap seemed to be the safe choice. And then later, we of course have incorporated the methodology for increase of the price cap in the day ahead. And we have used the same growth in order to project the revenue cap considerably. That's why the revenue cap we have defined in the second method, it goes from 1,000 to 1,400 in 2035. Next slide, please. This is all about EBA weather scenario and risk. We have also made an effort to show all as much as possible details regarding hourly results in the so-called scarcity event analysis. You will find in the report 3 types of very useful figures. First is the simultaneous scarcity events between electrically connected neighbors, which shows some simultaneous scarcity probability. So this number tells you what is the probability that a given neighbor is at the same time in scarcity, so having energy non-serve. The second one is we have also looked at the temporal distribution, in which you have these heat maps which plot vertically. Sorry, in the report you will see them clearly. You have for every week of the year on the vertical line, and for each hour of the day a heat map where it tells you for each week of the year what hour you expect to have adequacy risk. And then indeed you will see that the morning and evening peak show, but also the fact that we have a system with more and more renewables shows that the distributions are also happening not only in winter and at other moments of the day. And the last but not least, we also show the relationship between the duration of ENS and the amount of ENS. You could have situations in which your duration is larger, and there the different, for example, energy constrained assets with different durations will have ability higher or lower to contribute to adequacy. So this analysis is also very important to get the knowledge about that. I think next slide. Yeah, and last but not least, we would like to remind you that in the ERAA methodology, there are 2 economic viability assessments. One is the cost minimization, which is based on a close optimization based on stochastic modeling, in which economic decisions are based on the minimization of the total cost. Bit of time, I will not go more into details of that. The other one is a revenue-based approach, in which instead of doing a close optimization for the different candidates, you compute the revenues and you also compute the net present value, which is revenues and cost. You select a number of candidates which are considered to be at risk. You remove them or add them, and you continue a simulation until you reach economic equilibrium, in which no candidates will be missing money and no new candidates will basically have an economic opportunity. This we have considered these 2 methods in the report, and then I think it's time to let Lucas present us the results. So.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Łukasz Jerzyński from PSE, but today I represent ENTSO-E and would like to present a kind of creme de la creme of ERAA, which mean the results. So let's go to the next slide and concentrate on the figure. At the upper part of the figure, on the upper part of the figure, you can see the dark line, which represent the I would say TSO vision of the thermal capacity evolution, or in this case rather the evolution. So it is pure TSO data, while the light blue range shows the capacity state based on the EVA economic viability outcome. As you know from the previous part of the presentation, our central reference scenario, in the central reference scenario, we have 2 approaches, which refers to the risk aversion. And the upper values of the range show the enhanced harder premium assumption, while lower values harder premium with revenue cap. So the lower range, we can say, represent a little bit more conservative assumption of the risk aversion, because it limits revenues of the thermal units from the extreme price spikes hours. Values of the range represent a netted capacity, means decommissioning plus new entry plus extension of existing capacity. Details and also division of the fuel type can be seen on the lower part of the figure. So what we can deduct from this upper part, we can see quite significant gap between the capacity state comes from TSOs and EVA outcome, which is the result of the high scale of economic decommissionings done by the model, especially during the first two target years. This means that this capacity, the commissioning by the model, based on the assumption, of course, will not be economically viable. For the target years 2023 and 2035, the situation is a little bit balanced compared to the TSO input. Means the commissioning of existing capacities are more or less compensated by the new entries or extension. And I think that's all from this part, and we can move on to the adequacy results. This slide presents first two target years results. For the beginning, the short explanation about what we can see here. We can see the LOLE numbers, LOLE range represent by different risk aversion assumption, and also dots which represent the average among these assumptions. And the size, of course, show the scale of the LOLE. The magenta background of the bidding zones presents situation where LOLE values, independently on the assumption of the risk aversion, exceed existing reliability standards. So you can see quite high numbers of bidding zones with such situation. The next important numbers of area, colored by dark blue, shows the bidding zones for which the reliability standard does not exist. But still, we can see quite high LOLE values. So we can say that pan-European situation in case of LOLE is not good in this target years. And if we move on for the next slide, we can see that the situation will be worsened for the next two target years, means 2023 and 2035. Only a few bidding zones colored on the light blue, the results of ERAA, the LOLE met or not succeed the reliability standard calculated for these bidding zones. So I think the conclusion of the results will be presented by Ralph through the next slide. So thank you for the attention. I can see the hand raised and question. Should we?
Thank you, Lucas. We will revert to questions also then at the end in the Q&A section. It's me again. I try to be succinct now that we still have some time for a bit of Q&A, and would now like to highlight the main key takeaways we have from the ERAA. So what we observe from the simulations, please move on to the next slide, is that revenues which are obtained in our models from the energy-only market are insufficient to sustain sufficient, let's say, capacity of the thermal fleets, because in parallel we observe emergent adequacy risks. So that is a clear signal for interventions needed and a legitimation to introduce capacity mechanisms. And you just have seen from the pan-European map that many countries across Europe are impacted accordingly, with an increasing tendency towards the longer horizon, longer target years observed. The RES expansion only will not sufficiently compensate these developments. So as said, additional measures need to be taken. And of course, since all of these assumptions are subject to certain uncertainties about developments, close monitoring of what is happening is needed. For example, by the ever recurring ERAA investigations every year, but also additional and some complementary studies are needed to see how the situation evolves and how further deterioration of resource adequacy can be prevented. Next to generation capacities, also it is of utmost importance that other opportunities for maintaining resource adequacy and security of supply are taken. For example, scaling up storage capacities and using demand-side flexibilities and other flexibility resources as well, because they have an impact on the resource adequacy. And let's say the set of measures together, generation capacity, storage, flexibilities, and so on, is a solution towards maintaining and improving the adequacy situations, in particular in those areas which are increasingly at risk according to the ERAA simulations. Last point here, and important to underline, that the ERAA is a pan-European study, so it's widespread horizontally across Europe. However, this complexity also means that the ERAA has a limited capability only to go into details of national peculiarities and specific national developments. So ERAA definitely needs to be complemented by national studies which offer a more detail on specific national developments and sensitivities. And these national resource adequacy assessments and the ERAA shall be complementary to each other. Both can identify adequacy issues and adequacy concerns and propose and based on that appropriate measures like capacity mechanisms or so can be concluded. These are the main messages we want to to convey together with this ERAA. And on the next slide we see what are the next steps of this process. We are here today with the webinar results. We had a number of stakeholder interventions and engagements beforehand already, as you can see here. In parallel to this, the event today, the ERAA has been published and submitted by ENTSO-E to ESA right before Christmas. So we are now in the first part of the 3-month scrutiny phase of ESA, where they will check and assess whether there is a need for amendment and, of course, hopefully finally conclude that the ERAA can be approved. We expect that a result of this scrutiny by mid of March then accordingly. In parallel, what you also like to indicate already, we are already preparing the next edition. So since it's an annual product, so and needs a lot of simulations, so we have to start early. Data have been collected already. like for every cycle, methodology, let's say improvements and new developments are being prepared. Currently, we are in the data validation phase and the modeling preparation phase. And one of the next public interventions to our stakeholders will be then in around March, the call for evidence for the input data of the new era. Finally, I would like to invite you, that is on the next slide, that parallel to the scrutiny by ESA, this ERA 2025 is also subject to public consultation. This is still open until mid of February. You see and we invite you to contribute in this public consultation. Give us your feedback, give us your opinions, and that is ever appreciated by ENTSO-E, whether you support or give recommendations to further improve this important exercise. Thank you very much, and now I'll give back the floor to Lucas, because I guess we have around 15 minutes still for some Q&As from your side. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Ralph, and thank you, of course, all the presenters for this presentation. I'm very happy also to see quite a few questions already submitted on Slido. I would suggest if you would still have some, I will stay on the screen for a while. So in case you still missed a moment to scan a code or get the code to insert directly on the website so that you could use this at this moment. I see a few possibly also hands raised here in the presentation, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I would really appreciate that all the questions could be submitted directly on the Slido so that we could also take a look at what are the most upvoted and interested questions by the stakeholders, meaning yourself attending this webinar. Without further ado, I would jump on to write the questions raised already in the Slido, and I see that the most upvoted question is about the implementation A and B of the revenue-based DVA modeling. And I believe that Daniel, you might be able to help us out to answer this question. I see this is the most supported. I will just post out the question, which was asking actually, or noting first that they both yield rather different levels of post-DVA capacity, and which of the two are more robust and reliable. So maybe you could answer this question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good question, of course, which we have spent significant time trying to answer in ourselves. Both methods are robust, and they both represent indeed two interpretations of economic decisions by investors. One is basically considering that hurdles basically give you this extra revenue you need to gain in order to make a decision. So what investors will just make a decision only based on that, and accepting that their case might rely on, in some cases, very high price spikes. And the other one is a more prudent, in which, and this is again very much driven by the feedback we have received also from the survey of investors we have performed in the framework of the ERA methodology revision. The second approach means that on top of that, you consider the volatility, but also acknowledge that investments will not be made if they rely on these spikes. So which one is more robust? Both are robust. Both give you a view in which, of course, the one with revenue cap is more, there is less capacity invested, more capacity decommission, because there are less revenues. And therefore, we have presented the results in a range in which we have two central reference scenarios which give two complementary views of the impact. So that's basically the answer. Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you very much, Daniel, on this complete answer. I believe also there was rather a clarification question also if the EDA outputs or the results are inputs to the ED. I believe, Ralph, you already mentioned, and you could just reassure now very shortly the person who raised this question. It was anonymous, but still I think it would be important to reassure.
Well, that is a brief answer. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course. That is the logic of this ERA to feed, let's say, the adequacy simulations with the input, with the output of the investment modeling.
Great, fantastic. And I just realized that actually one of the top questions are still revolving about the revenue-based EVA. So a first question, I just see that it's popped up as the first one just recently. So thank you very much for voting, everyone. And the question is if ERA 2026 will be based on the revenue-based EVA. So Ralph, maybe you could also address this question.
Yeah, maybe I can elaborate on that. As presented also by Daniel in this ERA 2025, we have done simulations for both, let's say, EVA methodologies, the cost minimization and the revenue-based. Cost minimization so far is the, let's say, standard approach which has been developed and further developed and applied since ERA 2021. And since the last ERA 2024 and 2025, in parallel, we have investigated the opportunity of applying the revenue-based EVA approach. This took 2 cycles now to test and validate and finally conclude that it is fit for purpose. We assume that the revenue-based EVA provides the opportunity to improve the investment modeling further, since it offers different opportunities compared to the cost minimization approach in terms of considering the complexity of the model in terms of also achieving and striving for consistency between the EDA modules and simulations and the EVA and the ED on the other side. So we are now, let's say, after 2 years of testing, proof of concept, validation, and so on, we now can say we believe we are fit. This is fit for purpose, and the ambition is to actually apply this revenue-based EVA as the reference case for ERA 2026.
All right, fantastic. I hope this also answers all the questions from the attendees on what are the vision for ERA 2026. Not about 2026, but about ERA 2025. I see also a rather interesting question. The question sounds as approach 1 and approach 2. And here I would interpret that we are speaking about the risk aversion modeling approaches. They both result in different adequacy levels. And the question is, what does it mean for countries and their reliability standards? So Ralph, maybe you could also reflect from your perspective what it could mean for the member states having these 2 ranges of the adequacy results.
Yeah, what does it mean? So what does it mean for the reliability standard? I guess for the reliability standard, it doesn't mean anything so far, because they are determined by different studies. It's a member state's prerogative to define the reliability standards. So they are exogenous to ERA, and they say they are as they are. We observe now, of course, from the simulations with the different investor risk aversion approaches, different, let's say, levels of adequacy risks. Well, that is the outcome of the ERAA. The interpretation against the reliability standard lies within the member states, lies with the member states to take action or to take countermeasures to improve the adequacy situations accordingly. So I cannot include whether reliability standards will be reconsidered or not. I'm not sure whether that is the right way forward, but as I said, it's a member states or prerogative to decide on that. But surely we see, compared to the reliability standard, with the, let's say, more conservative modeling of, let's say, investors' appetite for investments, higher risk of adequacy concerns.
Okay, that's great. And I think it was quite really clear. So I have maybe very closely related about the meaning of the results, and another question also asks if we don't undermine the adequacy risks because of the unit commitment economic dispatch, assuming perfect foresight of electricity demand. So the question is in general rather if it doesn't undermine the LOLE estimates in our assumptions. So I just wonder if Ralph or Daniel, you could provide your perspective on this question.
Yeah, I have a perspective. So I guess we always need to distinguish between scenarios and uncertainties. And the uncertainties modeled here in the probabilistic analysis are the climate years and the outages of the summer generation fleet, in particular. Whereas demand is considered as part of a scenario. So, of course, a scenario is not certain. But it is not, let's say, an uncertainty we model here as an uncertainty. If we have a different prospect on development of demand or renewables or other generation capacity, storage, and so on, that would be a different scenario. Of course, you could do otherwise. You could also consider, let's say, demand as an uncertainty in terms of probabilistic analysis, also prices for fuels and so on, everything. But as said, we know what we believe, or also in line with the European and national energy policy targets, we have a set of data which belong to a scenario. So we keep it in a scenario box then and have the uncertainties in the probabilistic analysis on the other side. That is for sure debatable, but you also need to consider the more uncertainties you have, the more dimensions you add to the probabilistic analysis, the more complex it gets, and the more challenging is to have it computationally feasible.
All right.
Yeah, and maybe Lucas,
please, Daniel.
Yeah, but very quickly to add to that. So also the question relates to the understanding what are we looking at when we compute this LOLE? What is the adequacy we are analyzing in this resource adequacy assessment? So according to the methodology, what the answer we are trying to give with this number is to which extent the system as a whole is adequate, meaning the market, mainly for the wholesale market, which is the ahead and intraday, is adequate to cover demand. And this is basically what you are estimating. We are not considering additional uncertainties and risk due to the fact that you might have forecast errors and then indeed these estimates of load but also production might change. This is not the answer we are giving in this type of assessments. These answers are given somewhere else, just to simply relate to the perfect forecast point. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Daniel. And I see that it is already 1 minute over 11. I know also many people have other commitments, and therefore I would be now willing to close this webinar. I would like to thank everyone attending. Thank you very much for raising your questions. We addressed quite a few ones, especially the more conceptual ones here. Now I can promise that the answers will be also given then on Slido platform on the ones which were not addressed to you. The platform should be live for the whole day today, where you can also see the answers to your raised questions if we didn't manage to address them during this webinar. And now I would like just to also remind, as Ralph said, that we have a public consultation of ERAA 2025 report ongoing until 13th of February. So please do share your views in there, and we really appreciate, because it helps us to improve our product even further. Said this, I would thank once again to all the presenters, to all attendees, and especially to the ones who raised questions and actively participated in upvoting the more interesting questions for this webinar. Said this, I would wish you a pleasant day, everyone, and hope to see you in the following webinars of European Resource Adequacy Assessment editions.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to all audience.